Oh, and it automatically records. Brilliant. So, hello everybody. We're just going to let people in, and then we'll get started. So, thanks, Kristy and Kerry. Thanks for joining us. How's your day going so far?
Good, thank you.
Excellent.
How about you?
Yes, very good. We're in our Bournemouth office today, so it's nice to be down by the seaside.
With the sun out?
Yeah. So we'll just give it a couple of minutes, and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Right. I think everybody, let's get going. So welcome to our latest webinar, our B2B growth webinar series. And today we are talking about what some people might think is a contentious subject. We don't. When to choose HubSpot over Salesforce, or alternatively described when to move from Salesforce to HubSpot. So really this is a webinar that is of use to anybody that's looking at HubSpot Salesforce. So you might be a Salesforce user and you're wondering if there's a better option. You might be investing in a new CRM and considering your choices between Salesforce, HubSpot, and possibly other systems as well. And we know that choosing a CRM is quite a big deal. There's so many variations in the product. There's so much pricing complexity sometimes. But HubSpot and Salesforce are consistently rated, some of the best CRMs in the market. So that's why we're really focusing on today. So hopefully today we're going to help you work out what's the best option for your business. We're going to dive into some of the pros and the cons. Obviously, as a HubSpot Elite partner, we're going to say HubSpot is brilliant. We think it is brilliant. We think Salesforce is very good. We think HubSpot, especially Sales Hub Enterprise, competes brilliantly with Salesforce and often beats them in lots of different areas. But to make this less of a biased opinion, I'm really pleased to be joined by Kerry Leighton-Bailey, who will introduce herself in a minute. And she is both a Salesforce user and a HubSpot user. And Kerry's background is in marketing. I'm also joined by Kristy, who is a little bit more on the fence. She's used every CRM probably going, all sorts of different size organizations. So we've got some different opinions there. A bit of housekeeping. We're obviously going to be recording today and sending that out with the slides. If you've got any questions as we go along, please let us know and we will try and answer them. And we'll have a little bit of a poll at the end. So there we go. So let's, Kerry, hi, welcome. Thank you very much for coming.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry Leighton-Bailey, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Lumi. Lumi run annual general meetings for listed and non-listed organizations around the world. So we've got quite a diverse audience that we're talking to, and we use HubSpot in the main to manage that. But as Adam said, we also have Salesforce in our organization. So I would say I'm on the fence, but I think Adam probably knows which side of the fence I'm leaning towards slightly more. But I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We'll find out more about that in a minute. Kerry, thank you very much. And hopefully I won't get everyone's names mixed up today, but welcome, Kristy.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kristy Davies-Sumpter, Managing Director of Zest Consultancy. So my experience, I've worked in sales over 28 years, working with global organizations, national organizations, both at enterprise level, and now as Zest Consultancy, we work with a lot of small to medium-sized organizations. And, our role is to go in and try and help people from a sales perspective, looking at sales efficiencies, looking at sales performance, and obviously CRM comes into that. And over the years, I have used a lot of CRMs, so I feel I can kind of give a very broad view of CRMs. But yeah, I do have some favorites. I'm not going to lie.
We'll have to find out who they are in a minute. Looking forward to it. Bit about Boom. We're an elite HubSpot partner based in the UK. We service clients across EMEA. And we're really there to help people transition onto HubSpot or transition off systems like Salesforce, Pardot, Markup, Eloqua onto HubSpot and various other services in between. So look, we're going to talk about, get into the conversation, very much a conversation. And so let's just get going now on can I start with you, Kristy, really, let's just talk about sales and CRM. Like, where do they fit in? Tell us about your journey with using CRMs over the years.
Okay, so gosh, I'm going back more years than I'd care to mention when I first started using a CRM system, but all I'll say is dial-up still was a thing. And I used Goldmine. And yeah, it was clunky, but actually it did what it needed to do, but it just wasn't very quick. I think that might have had something to do with the dial-up situation. But, you know, I think from a sales perspective, you know, if you're wanting your sales team to be more efficient, more effective, then for me, the CRM is the foundations for everything that you do. And, you know, it still to this day makes me shudder a bit when I speak to a customer and they're very proud of the lovely Excel spreadsheet they have with all their customer data on it. You know, in years gone by, we used to do quite a lot of lead generation, and we would refuse clients unless they had a CRM system in place, because, you know, huge, great big Excel databases, you know, that could fall over or we could break was not something that we wanted to touch. And I think in this day and age, it still surprises me the amount of companies that maybe don't have a CRM in place, or maybe just have it in place because they've ticked a box but aren't using it to the best of their ability. And you know, so going back to my days when I worked in a global organization, you know, we had over 500 Salesforce users, and one of our biggest challenges was adoption. Now, that's nothing to do with the fact that it was Salesforce. I think generally it was a challenge that people experienced, and maybe to some extent do still experience. But I think a lot of that has had to do with how people have over-engineered the information that they wanted a CRM system to give them. And I think the more you try and expect a the end user to put into the system, the more challenges you're going to experience in terms of adoption. So you know, from my perspective, I think the more efficient and simple that you can make the system in terms of what your data you're trying to capture, I think the more realistic you are in terms of the number of the higher adoption rate that you're going to get. But, you know, I've also worked with organizations that have had, you know, 5 to 30 users on Salesforce. I've worked with a couple of organizations that have had 2 people on Salesforce, you know, which felt a little bit like a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. But, you know, people have always seen that someone like Salesforce, in my day there was Siebel, and there was you know, there's Microsoft Dynamics sat, you know, at the top, and people always had this impression that, you know, you knew you'd made it as a business if you were going to go for the big boys and introduce those into your business. But actually, there's some really great players that have come onto the market, you know, over the years, HubSpot being one of them, that have kind of blown things out of the water. They've got a different user interface that attracts, you know, people that that maybe Salesforce doesn't. You know, I mean, over the years, I've used things like, I had to write it down because I was trying to think of all the ones that I've worked with. Act, Zoho, Microsoft Dynamics, Insightly, Pipedrive, Siebel, Infusionsoft, Sugar, Goldmine, Fresh Sales, Autotask. And that was just the ones I could remember. So, you know, it's a lot. But some of those are CRMs that are bolted on to a piece of software that does something else. So like some of them are managed service provider tools that do ticketing like Zendesk, but also have a CRM part. But you often find with situations like that where their functionality is quite limited because the primary reason for the software is not the CRM. And they also have very limited marketing capabilities. So for me, you know, I think that every Salesforce needs to have a CRM system in place. You know, they have evolved hugely over time, and the fact that you can do things on the apps as well as doing them on the desktops and the, you know, I think it allows for more efficiency. You can put your sales process in, and, you know, it's not about shoehorning your processes anymore into the system. It's about mapping it out and having brilliant onboarding that will allow you to use the system as you want it, rather than trying to get your system to work the way the CRM wants it to work. So I think, for me, it's fundamental. If you want to grow your business, be able to make data-driven decisions, a CRM, is fundamental to that. I don't know what's your thoughts, Kerry?
It's interesting, actually, some of the things you said around, and if we think about the differences between Salesforce and HubSpot, and I know we'll talk about that a bit later, but the starting point of where that CRM came from, and a lot of what you've talked about there is sales. But for me as a marketeer, that's HubSpot is that tool that it started from marketing and it's evolved into sales, whereas Salesforce has started very much in that sales space. And certainly when I joined Lumi, which was only 4.5 years ago, we had Salesforce, and it is well embedded in the culture of our organization. And again, something that we'll talk about later, the thought of migrating away from something that has got 50 plus users in 11 different countries, I don't really want to think about how difficult that's going to be to get my head around. But we also we introduced HubSpot very quickly because it was really clear that Salesforce is very sales focused, and the bits, as you say, that they've sort of bolted on, they've got Pardot, it doesn't work seamlessly, in my opinion, as a marketing CRM platform. And admittedly, we still use Salesforce for anything beyond an SQL, and it does do that very well. But I think it really depends on the starting point of where those platforms came from, and whether CRM was at the heart of what they were building, or it's something they kind of just added on to their core proposition.
Well, actually, Kerry, that's really interesting, because this slide is called Sales and CRM, but as you touched on, the stakeholders, the people in the business that actually use this system, whatever you want to call it, it's quite varied. I mean, marketing, we have clients who have RevOps teams. Obviously, finance want to know all about what's going on in here. The account management or customer success team are often in it. So in a way, the whole category is like morphed into something much bigger than just something that salespeople use.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I think about the people that use it in our organization as well, and it is literally every department in the company touches them. There
you go. Well, let's dig in a bit deeper then. So Kristy, obviously in your job as working with lots of different businesses, I thought it'd be quite good to ask you, what you would, if there's people on the call today thinking, well, yeah, I could go sales, I could HubSpot, without going into the pros and cons of each of those quite yet, because we're saving that. That's going to be the best bit. How would you sort of advise them? Where do they start about, like, what's the process for selecting a CRM? What criteria should they be using, and so forth?
So if I go back to when I worked in a global organization, I was part of a team where we were actually looking, did we migrate to Salesforce, or did we migrate to Siebel? And we, went about building a giant requirements document, going through each of the departments and what people needed out of the system, and, kind of graded it, that level 1, 2, and 3. 1 is I must have, 2 is I'd like to have, and 3, well, in the future, maybe I could see myself using that, because otherwise it's very easy. And having been in sales, I'm terrible, you could sell anything to me, and it's like new shiny stuff, and so if someone tells you it's brilliant, you want it, but you have to question to yourself, do I actually need it? So it's easy to get carried away, and I have to draw many of my clients back and go, yeah, that's brilliant, it can do that, but why do you need it to do that? Well, I don't really, but it sounds like it'd be really good. So it's being realistic about what your requirements are, and making sure that you're including every area of the business in that decision-making process, the requirements gathering process, I should say, not necessarily in the decision-making process, so that you can really understand what people are trying to get out of it. Otherwise, I think if you're not careful, it can fall under one person who's going to make a very broad assumption around what sales, marketing, the revenue team, the customer satisfaction team all want out of this system, and even support, if you're looking at the support side of it as well from a ticketing side. So I think it's really important to understand exactly what you want that system to do. And I always encourage my clients to not only think about what they want the system to do for them now, but what they actually want it to do in 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, because you don't want to keep swapping. You know, it is so much easier now to migrate from one to another, but it's still, you know, Kerry, you mentioned, you know, you've got X number of countries. You know, when we were looking at it in the travel company I was working for, you know, we had 136 countries. You know, that's a lot of countries to try and change and make sure that you're getting everything that everyone needs. So I think it's thinking bigger picture and not just the short term of what you wanted to do right this minute. And then, you know, getting the users involved, making sure that you're not going off at tangents. And, you know, I think user adoption is going to be a big challenge. And one of the things I always say to people is, if you can't get people to use the system you're using now, what's going to change to make them use the new system? It isn't a magic wand. So it is about making sure that whatever you're choosing is going to work for the business, and understanding why people aren't currently using it now. Because I'm sure we probably have some people in the, you know, in the audience that are probably experiencing those challenges where they're not getting enough of their sales team to use it. And so I think it's understanding what those challenges are. Is it because, you know, some of these CRM systems are quite clunky to use, and, you know, it's all about reducing the number of clicks you have to do an action, and, you know, having that automation, having that sequencing in place. And maybe if that hasn't been utilized in what you're using, or it can't actually do that functionality, that's where a new CRM system can come into play and can give you that. You know, do you want your sales and marketing and your support and your surveys and everything else under one roof? And if that's the case, and any of the coaching tools that you use in sales, then it's looking at systems that can do all of that for you. And for me, that's kind of fundamental, because trying to do a role in sales and then have to go into another system to check if someone's opened that, and what have they done with that thing? You know, it's just putting barriers in the way to using the system. So I think having things integrated, so it's understanding everything that you either want it to integrate with or you want included within the system itself and the functionality that it can offer. And then I think, you know, there is a big question around budget. So kind of, how big's your purse, how deep are your pockets, and understanding, you know, what you're wanting to pay. And it's not just thinking about what you're wanting to pay, but also longer term, you know, the onboarding of that, and, you know, migrating data and all the other things that come with that. And then, you know, what resources you have available. You know, in previous companies, there's been a team of us that have worked to try and get all the functionality and everything that it needed to do. But you might be a smaller business, or a business that wants to be more self-sufficient. So it's looking at how much admin support that you need for the CRM system, or will it run by itself? Is it quite user-friendly? And then, you know, timeframes. How quickly do you want this to happen? Because it doesn't happen overnight. It does take quite some time to get things set up. But if you have a good plan in place and you know exactly what you want, I think that can speed things up.
And actually, there's a couple of things you said there, which are things I wish I'd known before we got cracking, actually. And the two main things that I think are really important to consider are, who is your internal champion for this CRM, and who ultimately is taking responsibility to increase the adoption of the platform, but just to, you know, really own every part of it. And whether that is an internal champion or you use a partner agency, which is what we did, who owns that? And then the other thing, which I think is really important, and again you touched on, is to not run before you can walk. And just because there are all those lovely shiny things, as you say, do you need them right now? But being mindful of, but you might need them in 2 to 3 years. So, you know, making sure that whatever platform you choose is going to scale with you as a business as you grow as well is really important. And I think those two things, having that internal champion and not chasing the next new shiny thing, is definitely something I could have done with on the wall when I first started with HubSpot.
Well, thank you for sharing that insight now, Kerry, because that's brilliant. And Kristy, I thought that was an amazing checklist almost of what people, we might have to turn that into a checklist or an ebook of what people should consider from someone like yourself who's seen so many different options. So look, let's get into it then. So Kerry, I'm going to ask you this. Where do you stand on the differences between HubSpot and Salesforce?
So I've been spending quite a lot of time thinking about how to present this in an unbiased way. So as we've said, I have HubSpot and Salesforce in my organization. And the way that we describe it is HubSpot look after, at the moment, everything from prospect down to SQL. And that's where Salesforce kicks in, because we've always had it there to deal with the creation of opportunities, the managing of logistics around the delivery of the AGM, the invoicing, and all of that kind of thing. But increasingly, to me, Salesforce is this clunky, cumbersome, difficult to navigate tool, whereas HubSpot just naturally evolves into the next area. So it starts as a marketing automation tool. That's what we onboarded it for at Lumi, was to execute our marketing campaigns. But now it covers, it's replaced our CMS system. So we were using something antiquated like Kentico. It's replaced that. So now it's not just our marketing automation, but it's our CMS. But now it's also our business development tool, because we're in with Sales Pro. So it's just evolving naturally and taking over this area that Salesforce used to be responsible for. And I'm finding now that probably 80% of what we do through the sales and marketing journey is in HubSpot, and a much smaller amount now through Salesforce. And I think that's just because of its ease of use. It is really intuitive, and everything is seamless. It's all within this one platform, and you're not jumping from one thing to another. And for me, that lack of need to have so many integrations is really important. Go on, you sounded like...
I was just going to say, because Kristy mentioned this as well about logging into different things. It sounds like a sort of minor point, but actually into people's day-to-day workflow, it's a big thing, isn't it? Let alone, you know, we for everyone that doesn't know this, there is a Salesforce HubSpot integration which works really well, but it has its limitations, and it's not quite the same as having it all in HubSpot. So having a system where the whole customer journey from lead acquisition, lead engagement, conversion, customer success onwards in one place has huge efficiencies, let alone the seamless like reporting. Yeah. Although Kerry, I know
we'll talk about reporting later. But actually, what you just said there, and I think I borrowed this phrase from you back in the early days, that single source of truth. HubSpot is that for our organization, but in a way that Salesforce never has been, actually, other than to look at, right, what's the revenue and what do those dials look like on the front screen. So for me, HubSpot is just, it's super intuitive, and not, I suppose these things shouldn't carry as much weight, but the fluffier parts of what makes HubSpot a more attractive tool for us to use, actually, it's the incredible level of support that is always available. So if I look at how we have a HubSpot champion and we have a Salesforce champion, and our Salesforce champion, she is brilliant, but we still have to have a support agency, and we still have to have a contact, etc. You know, there's a lot of extra support that is needed, whereas that intuitive nature of HubSpot, coupled with the support that's there when you need it, which you don't have to pay for, is excellent. And I also really just like that whole community feel. You're part of something with HubSpot in a way that I don't feel that you are with Salesforce. And that's really important. You know, they share, we get access to beta features before they've been fully released. You've got visibility over that product roadmap. So you know what's coming, so you can start to think about how it's going to add value to what you're doing as well. And I think those kind of things are really important. Can't add a value to them, but they're really important.
That's great. That's great, Kerry. Thank you. There's been a question from Shadab. Does HubSpot Enterprise compensate app level structure between custom objects? Actually, I'm going to talk about custom objects in a minute, so hopefully I'll answer that. And then there's a question from Mike. HubSpot recognizes its capabilities of sales and marketing. Do you think Salesforce needs? What do you think Salesforce needs to do in order to sort of catch up with HubSpot? That's a really interesting question. I suppose, Kerry, if you were in a way, what does Salesforce need to do to catch up with HubSpot, or to kind of play the same game?
I think Salesforce have got a very long way to go to ever be able to catch up with HubSpot, and it sort of goes back to that point that we made at the beginning around where they came from. So yeah. I mean, I've got a colleague or a peer, I suppose, in another organization, and Salesforce offered to fling in Pardot for free, almost as if, you know, it's a giveaway, we can give this part away. But actually that's the real heart of what HubSpot is. It is an inbound marketing engine, and that's Salesforce is never going to be that. So I mean, even if they stripped it back and then, you know, started again, they're going to have to go a very long way, I think, to be able to compete on a like-for-like basis. And as you said at the beginning, Adam, so many people spend time is HubSpot as good as Salesforce? But actually, I think the question really, depending on your use case, admittedly, you know, from where you're coming from, but the question really is Salesforce as good as HubSpot?
Yeah, I'll let you pose that one. That's good. So, Kristy, just to jump in here, what are your thoughts? Because I really love the idea that you'd work with very small companies using Salesforce, and very large ones. And I think there's a perception that Salesforce is what you need when you're big, because you've got to get, you know, no one got fired for hiring IBM, that type of thing. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that's the case anymore. I think there is still that mentality, but the reality is something different, in that actually it isn't this badge of honor to say we've got big, so now we need Salesforce. It's we've grown as a business. And you know, if we're comparing HubSpot to Salesforce, I think as new businesses come on board, that I think HubSpot is the way that organizations are going. Because if you're new into business, you only know one way of working, and HubSpot does that for you. And that's not me being biased. I think that is the reality, that people want that sales and marketing hub that is going to drive that activity. And, you know, if people are saying that, you know, nowadays, you know, 80% of your 80% of the decision-making process is done before the buyer even talks to a salesperson, then something like HubSpot is really effective. And I think, you know, that, you know, Salesforce has been great. It's been a good steady eddy, but it's just got left behind a bit in terms of its user interface. I think the fact that you do need so much support to do anything. And what I've seen in a number of businesses I've worked in is that it starts prohibiting them to grow as an organization, because it's that sort of catch-22 situation where they need more time to get it sorted, but they haven't got more time, but they would have more time if they sorted it. And it just goes round and round and round in circles. But, you know, it does cost a lot, you know, because you've got to get people in all the time to change stuff. You need to have some, you know, we had a strong team of support people and champions for each of the countries to be able to get this to work vaguely effectively for us, whereas I don't feel you need that quite so much. You still need champions. I think any CRM needs a champion, but I think less so with HubSpot than Salesforce. I just think it's slicker, it's easier to work with. It's all about, you know, nowadays we're expecting, you know, from a sales perspective, there is a lot you need to do. You know, it isn't just about, I write letters, I pick up the telephone, and marketing do the advertising. You know, things have changed a lot, and there is an expectation on the salesperson to know where they're at through that journey. And I think, you know, the CRMs that give you that visibility, and you can see whether someone's opened something, you haven't got to click into other systems, that I think that's where HubSpot comes into play.
Yeah, you're so right, actually. And if I think about Lumi, where, you know, 4 years ago we said we don't have salespeople, and even now we reluctantly admit that we have a handful of business development people. Our marketing engine works really hard, and it does do 80% of that journey before it hands over to a human, if you like, to close that final stage.
So it's all about trying to make life as simple as possible, and as efficient, you know, have all those efficiencies in the business, so that your teams, whether that's sales or marketing, can be their most productive.
And also, as you say, going beyond that, and if I think about, and I know we'll probably touch on pricing in a minute, but if you look at what's included versus what isn't, even as you go beyond that point, you get them, you convert them to a customer, well, then we have to send this out over here to Sage accounting and all that kind of stuff. And then the billing is handled in a different way. Whereas it's so efficient in the HubSpot system in the way that information is just transferred through stage by stage. and just the reduction in admin, as you said, that is required to use a platform like HubSpot in comparison to Salesforce is significant.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's also about what's included within HubSpot versus with Salesforce. There are a lot of extras you have to pay for that just come as standard with HubSpot. And so for me, I think functionality wise, it wins.
Yeah.
Just on the pricing thing as well, Kerry, because you might have this. Obviously, we're not a Salesforce user, but from the clients that we work with, Salesforce have a slightly different pricing model, which is per user. And when they say user, it's like you're a user if you want to just get into it, to do anything, even just look at stuff, right? So you're paying for every one of those people. With HubSpot, basically everyone can go in, have a look around, look at reports, look at the CI, look at the data and stuff like that. And if you're a sales user and want a paid seat to do more advanced things inside the platform, then you pay for those people.
Yes, and you can pay for it and scale it up and scale it down as you need. So you're not locked in. So if you're particularly seasonal in your business, and we have two relatively short windows through the year where we will scale up how productive our salespeople are and how many of them we have, well, then we can just add on a few more seats and then we can take them away again. So you're not locked in that way. It is very flexible as a system.
Nice.
And I think I agree with you in terms of, my role was going in sometimes to do sort of that sales director on demand type role. And the challenge you have there is I need to get access to the system. So when it was Salesforce, they would have to purchase me a license, but I wouldn't be using it anywhere near the depth that a salesperson would be using it. And it's a shame you couldn't just have that view option.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's important probably not to get too. So I was just going to finish off on price. It's important not for us to get too carried away from price, because I think what happens anyway when a customer goes to Salesforce and they mention the word HubSpot, then the price miraculously drops to Salesforce in line with it. So so whatever you do, everyone listening, whichever system you go for, they are very sensitive to HubSpot.
Yes, indeed. I had a couple of, trying to be slightly less biased about the fact that I really am all in on the HubSpot love train. There are a couple of things actually that I think HubSpot could do better. And one of those two things, actually, I think Salesforce probably still does do a bit better. So reporting is one of them. And I find that the reporting in HubSpot isn't as intuitive as the rest of the platform is to use. And I find it harder to bring together a joined up report in HubSpot than I do in Salesforce. So all the information is there, but sometimes I think it can be a tiny bit clunky to pull it all together. And then the other point, and we did talk about this before the call, so I'll try not to be quite so vehement about it, but the other point I have, and it touches on sales marketing, to me, that's one function. We're all responsible for taking a prospect and converting them to a customer, and just, which parts of the journey do we look after? And that's definitely a culture that we have at Lumi. It's not, whoa, sales have just closed a deal. It's a very much a collaboration. And I do find in HubSpot, when we look at attribution, and we've since built a bespoke attribution model actually to counteract this, that HubSpot is very good at over-egging its attribution. So you can send a relatively small campaign and it will show you you've influenced a far more significant number of contacts, and you're almost certainly responsible for all these millions of pounds of revenue that you're now seeing in your system as a result of HubSpot. So I think and having had that conversation with HubSpot, I know they are aware of the fact that they probably need to rein that enthusiasm in a little bit. But they are generally minor things. It's everything is doable, and for us, we've got pretty standard reporting set up now. So once you've overcome that it's built and it's there anyway. So I was just trying to think of something to counteract the how much I love HubSpot argument.
So Kristy, from your point of view, I mean, if you were talking to an organization that we're primarily focused on B2B tech companies, and a lot of our guests today will be in B2B tech. I mean, what's the verdict from your end in terms of the two systems and whether they should consider one or the other?
My verdict, when you're considering one or the other, is obviously looking at your requirements and understanding does each of the products that you're looking at, you know, match that. But if I was to make a choice over Salesforce or HubSpot, I would definitely choose HubSpot. I've not been paid to say that. That is a genuine reality, because I've experienced both number of businesses, you know, dependent on different sizes. And for me, it just, if you want really good user adoption, because let's be fair, if people don't use it, it doesn't matter what system you've got. It's, you know, it's irrelevant. But if you want people to use it, make it as easy as possible and as attractive as possible with a really good user interface. Make it accessible, make it useful to the people that are using it with visibility. And for me, HubSpot wins. I do agree with Kerry, though. I'm not a lover of either of the reporting in Salesforce or actually HubSpot. I think that could get smarter. But overall, HubSpot's the winner for me, because I like the fact that everything is under one roof, that you can do the quotes, you can do the documents, you can do the ticketing, you know, you name it, you can do it. And so for me, that's why it wins, because I see too much time wasted from a sales point of view and less productivity, because they're jumping in and out of systems to try and get everything to work. And so for me, it's all about efficiency. The more efficient, the more sales that the team can do.
Love it. Well, listen, let's jump to a couple of questions. So Jennifer Bell's got two questions. Jennifer works in marketing, and her sales team, a lot of them have come from Salesforce, and it sounds like they're using HubSpot, but they struggle with where they should qualify customers before creating a deal in the pipeline for them. Is that something that you experience, either of you, or do you want to offer an opinion on that?
No, we haven't struggled with it as an issue, actually. I mean, I'm very lucky to have a super fantastic inbound marketing manager who's our HubSpot champion. So we've used, and I know you'll talk about this, but a lot of custom objects to build out that space, to have all of that qualification criteria, and actually when those change, what then happens to that lead and how they move through our pipeline and our qualification criteria. So it's not something I've struggled with, to be honest.
Okay. Kristy, any thoughts on that?
No, I don't. I would agree. It's defining the process to make sure that you have got that set up, so that you do know where it's qualified and where it moves on to the stages. I think sometimes people get confused in terms of the pipeline stages of how they go through those stages. I think sometimes it's overcomplicated.
Yes. Well, and just to offer an opinion on that, I mean, there's to everyone's point, I mean, you can do it however you want, and the simpler the better. We've obviously got lead scoring, and that measures engagement that might be used for qualification. There's obviously ideal company profile and customer fit scoring and stuff like that. So using firmographic, intent data, whatever, that's going to automatically perhaps give some scores to a company. There's forms that we can use to ask specific questions that might indicate how ready they are to buy or how suitable they are. So all the tools are in there. We then use lead status to say this is a new lead or a lead that needs to be looked at. And then we've obviously got marketing qualified, sales qualified. I know some people use sales accepted lead, and you can have criteria around that if the system can determine it, would automatically qualify it. Or if it has to go to a human to be looked at, as it were, then you can create automations around tasks and handing them over to that person to look at. So there's loads. I think, again, back to the user adoption piece, it sounds to me, it's like, is there a clear process for that? And do the guys know how to use it? But it can definitely be done. But then Jennifer's got another question, which is a bit harder to answer. So Jennifer's in marketing. I struggle with the lack of functionality and compatibility with integrating additional systems such as Xero and Airtable. Is it genuinely as difficult to integrate these systems with Salesforce?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have found it the other way around. So we have used Xero, and we've just changed to Intact, I think, which the integration process, which Salesforce told us would take about 6 weeks, actually took more than 3 months. It was awful, actually. And going back to that all under one roof solution, if your billing is handled through HubSpot, then you have no need to integrate with that system either, I don't think. So I mean, I found HubSpot to be incredibly open, actually, and we're building a custom API at the moment with them into something that we've built, like a proprietary piece of software in-house, and they've been fantastic for that. So I think it's harder to integrate with Salesforce than HubSpot, from our experience.
Okay. And it might be worth, I don't know if you've seen it already, Jennifer, but there's the HubSpot Operations Hub, which does have a lot of additional native integrations in there. And as discussed, we use Xero, a lot of our clients use Xero. The native integration there is limited, I grant you. And often you need to build a custom integration to do what you want to do there. But please look out for the invoice object, which is in beta for HubSpot. So in theory, when the invoice object goes live, you'll be able to sync all your invoices from Xero or whatever other system into HubSpot. So you'll have a kind of exact replica of all the invoices there. It'll be a lot easier to achieve reporting and commission calculations, things like that one. So that's coming. Jennifer says, thanks, that's good to know. Right, Ruth, we have Salesforce and HubSpot. However, sales adoption of Salesforce is low. How do you overcome lack of closed-won data when calculating marketing attribution? Who wants to answer that?
I can have a stab. At Lumi, you cannot issue an invoice unless closed-won data and the fields have been populated. So actually, we go further and make a lot of the fields in Salesforce mandatory. So you can't create the opportunity, which will then allow you to create the logistics and deliver the event without filling in that data. So that's how we've overcome it, because and we're not, we've had to do that because adoption of using it was too low and we weren't getting the data that we wanted. So that's how we've managed to overcome it.
Yeah, I would agree, mandating it, but also making sure that whether it's your sales managers, your sales director, or whoever, there's someone in the business that's kind of championing that, to ensure that on a weekly basis the sales team are changing the statuses, especially around your pipeline of when the opportunities are supposed to be closing, so that you can always estimate your revenue or potential revenue, because quite often there'll be things sat somewhere for months, sometimes years. So it's making sure that that is kept up to date, and then mandating the field so that they can't do a next action unless that's happened.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, so what we're going to do, Jay Krog has got a question. Are there any plans to improve the report to a more intuitive platform and easy link of data in HubSpot? I'm actually going to talk in a minute about custom reporting, so maybe that touches on it. So we'll hopefully come back to that. I'm just going to move on then, because I think that HubSpot today, I think, and ladies, please jump in here, but I think that we still speak to people who assume that HubSpot is a marketing tool, not a CRM. Or if it is a CRM, it's a CRM, but only for small businesses. So both of those things are true and not true, if you know what I mean. So what we've done is we've distilled it down to the big five. So if you want to take this away as an argument for why we think HubSpot is better than Salesforce, the first one is it has enterprise-grade customization. Salesforce has great customization. Historically, we work with customers who have things in Salesforce and they say, I want to move to HubSpot, and they cannot replicate what they've done. But of course, you dig beneath the surface, and it's spent 2 years and hundreds of thousands of pounds getting to that point. So, but now we can do this very nearly the same level of customization inside HubSpot. The total cost of ownership, I think, and I'm going to go into number one in a minute. Total cost of ownership we touched on. So I think when you're looking at the two systems, there's obviously the license costs as they appear. And then as we've talked about the license cost per user, you need to really drill down into that and understand what you're paying for per user. You then have any additional support costs that Salesforce might charge you that you need to be aware of. HubSpot will not charge you for those things.
Yeah, and can I just say there, Adam, sorry, when we were talking about this the other day, because I'm really hammering the point of we don't need these two systems because there's so much overlap between them. And our finance director chucked out a figure and he said, well, this is how much we pay for Salesforce. I said, that is how much we pay for Salesforce, but how much do we pay for this and the support agency? And actually then he was like, oh, actually, you know, just step back a bit, because there is so much more around their pricing. It's not as transparent as the HubSpot pricing model.
Not as transparent. I think we touched on number 3, the deep integration to marketing, service and CMS. So we love it when customers who are using HubSpot CRM go, actually, does HubSpot do websites, is it? Yeah, have a look. Oh my God, this is like way better than anything else. Again, people don't know that HubSpot does incredible website software. Ease of use, we've talked about. Kristy, when you were talking earlier, I almost thought, do you know what? Get HubSpot, get Salesforce, whichever one your team is going to use the most. I mean, at some level, it comes back to if the user adoption, if you know the user adoption is going to be higher on one or the other, then great. For example, if you've got a sales team that have all come from a Salesforce background, okay, is it really worth moving them all to another system? Is it worth that pain? You know, I would be asking myself that question if I was in anybody's shoes doing that, because, you know, what we have seen, of course, we've moved people over and it's precipitated a whole new change in sales processes and increases in efficiencies, not because of the software, but because they've used this as an opportunity to just chuck some stuff out that they weren't doing properly and they didn't process that no one followed, and resetting things. So I think that's a kind of a reason to look at this as well. And the superior customer service. What I love about HubSpot is you go onto their website and you go, oh, call me back. And they call you back in 5 minutes. And the people that call you back, I always think they're like sort of Harvard PhD students sitting in Boston, Massachusetts. They're just seem to know everything. I mean, you know, we're an elite partner, so the only time I ring them up, I'll ruin things that no one else seems to have a clue about, and they're really, really hard, and they just seem to know.
Yes.
So I think that's to Kerry Decker that. So a couple of things. So we've got custom reports in HubSpot. What you see here is actually off-the-shelf reports. So in terms of sales analytics, for example, deal change, quota attainment, historical pipeline snapshots, push rates, waterfall, deal funnels, change history. Change history people love, don't they, Kerry? Because it's like, right, so why did you downgrade that deal last month?
Yeah,
we didn't seem to talk about that, but the system's telling me you did. But we've also got custom reports, so we can then pivot. We've got pivot tables, we've got line graphs, we've got all sorts of visualizations possible. We can actually associate and compare different objects, so we can do deals versus companies, deals, people, custom objects against deals, all that sort of stuff. So the level of customization of reports, it's quite hard, albeit what Kerry said, there are limitations to not achieve some reports that you want. And then the other big step last year was custom objects. So this was something that was a big problem with people moving off Salesforce, was that, you know, in Salesforce, we have got accounts, contacts, leads, whatever, deals. But we've also got subscriptions and we've got services as objects as well. Can you do those in HubSpot? Beginning of last year, we're going, no, really sorry. And it was a deal breaker. Now we're like, okay, whatever objects you've got, we'll just recreate them in HubSpot. Great, there you go. So custom objects is a big leap forward in terms of, you know, comparing the two systems. The other big thing that came out last year was custom coded workflows. So what you can see here is, if you like, the WYSIWYG workflow editor. So within the CRM, there's all sorts of sales automation, lead rotation, you know, lead enrichment, whatever you want to do here. But now we have custom coded workflows. So if you've got developers, or if you want to use a partner like ourselves, we can actually put JavaScript inside a workflow that's going to do really, really complicated things. The classic one that we're working on at the moment is commission calculations. Deal is closed one. Bob's got some sort of wacky commission thing, so that, you know, if the deal's like half in America and half in Europe, you get the 2 times accelerator minus how many weeks it took him to do it, blah, blah, blah. So seemingly impossible calculations can now be done inside it. Likewise, we can use custom coded workflows to go and get data from other systems. So great for what Jennifer was talking earlier about qualification. You might have another data source where you want to bring in data to qualify something. That can all be coded in and achieved really simply. And then the other one I wanted to look at was two other things: CRM custom cards. So you can bring in data, or you can customize what is pulled in on a record. So on a contact record, you can see a demo tickets. You can customize data that is seen against the contact. And the other big one, end of last year, is business unit. So I think, again, HubSpot not really seen as an enterprise play. Now we've got business units, so we can segment the marketing, the data, the teams, the access, the permissions, all this sort of stuff by business units. We've even got like brand kits for different business units, and you can have multiple business units. So we often work with businesses that, you know, that was a key feature of Salesforce, and now we can do that. So, Kerry, any comments on those points there?
No, I mean, I think it's all, as you say, that parity of what people say, well, we really need it to do this because we've always had it in Salesforce. That gap is getting ever closer. And certainly when I looked at it 4 years ago, can we just go all into HubSpot straight away? It was a definite no, whereas now it's a definite yes. So it's, but this bit that you're about to talk about is that's the bigger objection to get over, when it's Salesforce has been embedded for such a long time, and you know, all the struggles of user adoption, as you've talked about, Kristy, as well. How do you just get everybody on board with why this is a good thing? Yeah.
Okay, let's go into this then. So let's assume we're in a situation where everyone goes, yeah, do you know what? HubSpot is better than Salesforce. Let's move from Salesforce to HubSpot. But how painful is that going to be? How long is that going to take? Do you know what? Is it really worth doing it? You know, let's not bother. Is there going to be any business interruption? That's the other thing that people are terrified about. You know, we've got this fast, high cadence sales operation. What's going to happen if they go offline even for like a day? It's going to really screw things up. So suffice to say, we're quite good at this migration business now, and it's relatively straightforward. But it's worth, you know, we start off the conversation about what exactly do you want to migrate, because there's different types of data and different things that you want to migrate. The first one is data. The amount of times people have migrated from Salesforce or another system, Dynamics, HubSpot, and they've said, oh, you've got 200,000 records. And then it turns out actually it's 50,000 because everyone knows 150,000 contacts are useless and bounced and whatever. So having a conversation about what data needs to go over, what are the assets that need to be brought over? So and I'll talk about, so data migration is dead easy, right? I'll tell you why in a minute. Asset migration, so you might have Salesforce forms or landing pages or lead scoring or files and things that you know you're using in your ecosystem. They need to be rebuilt in HubSpot, but that is not a big deal, because what we do is we just mirror them. We mirror them and then we improve them. So there'll be features that HubSpot have that Salesforce didn't, so we can actually make them more effective. And as I said, there'll be underperforming forms and landing pages that you just don't want to migrate anyway. So we have a process for doing that. One of the things that most people want to bring over to the system is the timeline, right? i.e. the timestamp, the date stamp of when an email was sent, when the deal was closed, when a contact was created, that sort of stuff. That is seamless. I'll tell you why in a minute. And the last one is some of the automations. So if you've got a lot of automations that you set up in Salesforce, they'll need to be rebuilt, which is fine. It's just the process of rebuilding them, running them in the development portal, testing them before setting them live. But the reason we're really happy with taking people from Salesforce to HubSpot is because of the native integration. So one of the things that we do, the native integration works across all objects, custom objects, contacts, companies, deals, tickets, etc. So the first thing that we would do is we would actually use that native integration to sync the two systems together. So we take your live environment of Salesforce and sync the data over into HubSpot. That means we've got timeline, that means we've got contacts, that means we've got all the history, the deal history and everything already brought across. That's done via the API in the native integration. So that actually deals with, I don't know what percent, I'm just going to say 65% of the job, in fact. We can then look at the system and then start rebuilding and adding in the new bits that aren't done. So like the forms and the lead scoring and some of the automation. And actually, you know, we've got quite a slick process now for migration. The first thing we do is we sit down with clients and we understand all the use cases, understand the critical timelines, understand any sensitivities around data, around users. We build out a migration plan. What we then do is we start mapping the fields and the assets. So in Salesforce, you might call one thing X. We need to make sure X is the same thing in HubSpot. So we look at the two things, we map them so we know exactly that field, that property is the same as this property in HubSpot. We then do the build out in HubSpot, so build out the system. Then we do the migration. It's a phased migration using the native integrator. And then we build out all the assets. We do some Q&A, we do training, we do lots of testing before it goes live. So we run things in a closed environment. Some clients want to go live with 1 or 2 salespeople using it in tandem with Salesforce. So we can do that. And so we can run a pilot so we can make sure, iron out any bugs. We do more training. Kristy said about user adoption. Training is crucial. People need to know, not just, they just want it simple, don't they, Kristy? They just want to know, this is my job, this is my screen, this is how I customize my filters. These are the buttons I press. Great, thanks very much, and get on with it.
Absolutely. And things like cheat sheets are always good as well. So having like a user guide, but some cheat sheets that people can quickly refer to. It's all about governance, isn't it? Because you want everyone doing it in the same way. Otherwise, when it comes to reporting and stuff like that, you're not comparing apples to apples.
Absolutely. We then set it live, and then we're on hand to do any post-live support, any little tweaks, any things that people change their mind on that they need for their support. So that was really, hopefully got across from our point of view, how simple it is to do a switch, providing there's the planning. We've gone through all the detail of what you want to bring across, and the devil's in the detail. Sorry, Kerry.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, well, I feel convinced already, Adam, how easy it's going to be.
When are we going to have the conversation? Yeah, about getting rid of Salesforce. So listen, we haven't had any more questions. Let me just double check. Thank you. We've had a lot of questions anyway, but that's great. Oh, okay, here we go. Aidan, can the native integration thing only apply to a filter of certain accounts by custom fields? So we have a field for vertical markets and would only want to sync accounts. That's absolutely correct, Kerry, isn't it? We have the inclusion list, don't we? So we can set what.
Exactly right. We'll be very choosy about what information passes between the two systems, and if it's not on that inclusion list, it doesn't go across.
Yeah, there you go. Hopefully that answers your question. Fabulous, brilliant. I'm just going to ask a quick poll. Are there any other questions, everybody? So while we're doing the poll, how long would you allow to start from finish to move off Salesforce? Oh gosh, it depends. It depends on the use cases. So, as I said before, we've worked with people who basically were not even using Salesforce very much. And so in a sense, it was a dead system. And actually it was almost like a clean install. So that was done in like 6 weeks. We've got other people that have very high, high cadence sales processes, lots of sales users. And that's taken sort of 6 to 12 weeks. We have other clients that are doing multiple hub implementations of HubSpot. So they're kind of building their entire marketing, sales, operation, customer support system, and that can take months. So obviously we try and do it as quickly as we can, referencing people's critical timelines, but it's not necessarily something that can be rushed. Cool. Do you cover the enhancements to reporting? Seems to be challenges to get data from various. Did you cover the enhancements to reporting? I tried to, Jay Krog. There's so much to. What we might do is reach out to you and just send you some information about the reporting. And we've also done a webinar previously about custom reporting. Good, he says okay, or she says okay. Brilliant. So Kristy and Kerry, final thoughts from you, really.
You want to go first, Kristy?
Okay. I think if you are a Salesforce user, or if you are another CRM user, because there are plenty of others out there, and you're thinking of moving, I think HubSpot is definitely a great option to consider, and should be in your top 3, if not your number 1. And I think also mentally, people have always, or historically have always thought migrating is a nightmare, and people just have avoided it, and they've put off doing it because they think it's really cumbersome and it's going to take forever. And I think the reality is, if you choose the right partner, it's a really good opportunity to sort of put your stake in the sand and redefine what you're looking for. So get rid of those old practices and start putting some new processes in place. I think that your CRM could work really efficiently for you. So for me, it would be HubSpot.
And I'm almost certain that everyone can deduce where I am on that point. But I think for me, inbound marketing is absolutely fundamental to revenue growth at Lumi. It's just transformed the way that we have grown our business, and HubSpot is the only platform that can facilitate that strategy for us. So I'm all in on HubSpot.
Yay.
Sorry, Salesforce.
Thank you so much, Kristy and Kerry, for your honest, expert opinions on this debate. We really appreciate your time. It's been great having you on board. And for everyone listening, also thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, just to let you know, we're here to help you with any decisions you might want to make about the issue and switching. So please get in contact with us if you need more information. But on that note, thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Lovely.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.